The latest statistic is that it's 1 in 5. When we started 8 years ago, it was considered to be 1 in 8. Now it's 1 in 5. I don't even think that's right. Our research is showing that it's probably far closer to about 1 in 3, if not even higher. And I think in the UK right now, there is an 8-year waiting list to get diagnosed for certain things. And so it's very, very difficult for a lot of individuals. And so there's a huge discussion about how do we improve that, or are there other ways to do that, or why do we even care? Like, why are we even putting labels on this stuff? Let's just acknowledge that we all are different.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, Kay. I think we're ready to roll.
All right, let's do it.
Everybody, today's guest is someone that's very special because she's reshaping the way we think about workspaces. Kay Sargent, really well known, senior principal and director at HOK. Do you say HOK, Kay, or do you say HOK?
We say HOK.
I hear both bouncing around the industry.
Yeah. Well, the ones, it's HOK. It's named after our 3 founders, Dolman, Obata, and Casabon. HOK.
Very nice. I'm glad I asked. But Kay, I love how you've really delved into like inclusive design and neurodiverse design. It's a massive thing. I mean, I'm having tons of conversations about it at the moment. Everybody's bringing it up, and I was on a panel.
I'm delighted to hear that. I love that.
Yeah. Well, it's a funny thing, and I was on a panel about it the other day as well, and it's really strange. You start talking about neurodiversity, and you think it's this like crazy group of whackheads, and everyone's talking about it and like the sort of the effects of it or how it translates into everyday life. And I'm sitting there thinking, definitely relate here.
Guy, I cannot tell you, when we first started talking about this, I think the first presentation we ever did was in Singapore or Hong Kong, probably like 6 years ago, maybe longer. No, it had to be like 7 years ago, way before the pandemic. And I had to prepare my colleagues because I said, every time I present on this or share, there's an aha moment that somebody has in the audience and people start to relate to this. And I think this, people have said, what is happening now that all of a sudden the numbers of people that are neurodivergent is increasing so much? And I don't think it's actually increasing. I think it's the awareness is coming off of something that has always been there, but that we either just suppressed or wrote up as something else or just tried to ignore. And now people, I think, are realizing that we all think differently. We process things differently. And we have just all been muddling through trying to, kind of be that average person doing the average thing. But I don't know who that is anymore. And so I think we're just embracing who we really are.
It's so funny to hear that because when I was on the last panel, you can see everyone in the audience nodding, like loads of these like aha moments like you're saying. And you're thinking, yeah, there's about 25% of people, but it's so hard to get diagnosed or whatever. You probably know the stats better than me, of course, but
yeah, the latest statistic is that it's 1 in 5. When we started 8 years ago, it was considered to be 1 in 8. Now it's 1 in 5. I don't even think that's right. Our research is showing that it's probably far closer to about 1 in 3, if not even higher. And I think in the UK right now, there is an 8-year waiting list to get diagnosed for certain things. And so it's very, very difficult for a lot of individuals. And so there's a huge discussion about, okay, well, how do we improve that? Or are there other ways to do that? Or why do we even care? Like, why are we even putting labels on this stuff? Let's just acknowledge that we all are different. Even if you're neurotypical, and by the way, calling somebody typical has never been a compliment. But even if you are neurotypical, every single one of us is being impacted by the built environment that we're living in. Light, temperature, sound. And so this isn't about the fringe group that is a minority. This is about sensory processing, cognitive well-being to maximize human performance so that everyone can thrive.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up so early on because that is actually something that I'm really passionate about as well, in the sense that it's so often thought of as this small minority group, which is not a minority group. It's like, I've never heard this 1 in 3, maybe higher, but that sort of shows something. And then secondly, it's how everybody benefits, which is what I think's a learning piece that everybody needs to kind of see, I guess.
Yeah. I think there's two sayings, kind of like if you design for the edges, you get the middle for free. Or when you design for the extreme, um, you benefit the mean. Every single one of us is going to benefit if we create environments where we have more control, options, and choices about the types of spaces that we're in.
Yeah. Have you had any, because you've got like extensive experience in that, have you got any examples of when something might have seemed like a niche specialist thing for this neurodiverse group, but actually just turned out to be a huge benefit to absolutely everybody that was occupying the space?
I could give you a long list, but let me just pick 2 or 3 of my top favorites. Focus rooms. Now it's almost like guaranteed that almost any space that you go into, but 10 years ago, those were kind of a novelty. You didn't really have that. And just this notion that every now and then we just all need to be able to cut out the noise, and to be able to focus and concentrate. But I think we also need to realize that not everybody is hypersensitive, a sensory avoider. There are some people that are actually hyposensitive or sensory seekers. And sensory seekers may not want to be in a small confined box. They might need to move and fidget. They might want to be in a buzzy environment. Think about all those people that go work in a Starbucks, right? It's not because the coffee is so cheap, right? Or it's quiet. It's because a lot of us actually feed off of being around the energy of other people, and we need that. And so we need to kind of create those balances. But, sound. There's a lot of environments where we're putting in sound masking, and about 10% of the population gets headache from white noise and can't handle that. We used to think that having adjustable lighting was nice, but there are a lot of people that get migraines, and being able to be in a room where you can actually turn the lights off or down significantly can be really important for some certain individuals. And just to give you a real live example, we designed Arab's space in Birmingham. And we did this started on early in the pandemic. And from the beginning, we're designing for engineers. Okay. So they want to know why this and why that and, all of this, right? So there's a science to what we do. And so we really leaned into the whole thing about neurodiversity, and it helped expedite the process because they could understand why we were recommending what we were recommending. And so that, okay, great, we get it, approved, right? So that expedited the process. But we really thought about everything, and we worked with their engineers to really think about the lighting and the acoustics and just all of the different things and the different types of space zones and how people are going to be using this space and how do we create, introduce elements of biophilia and just everything. Every element of that space was intentionally and very specifically designed. And it won a bunch of BCO awards, which we're really, really proud of. And about a year and a half ago, we were touring some folks, and one of my colleagues was there. He came over and he was just really emotional. And he said, this gentleman just came up to me and he said, "Are you the designer?" Now, you don't necessarily always want to know how you want to answer that question, because if they have a beef, that it's like, okay, here it goes, right? But this gentleman, he says, yes, we're the designers of the space. And he goes, I just want to thank you, because I've worked for this company for 10 years and I've never been able to be in the office because either the lighting or the humming, the flickering of the sound system or the lighting system and all of those things really bothered me, and I couldn't function. I said, for the first time in 10 years, I've actually been able to be in this space without getting physically ill. And I've connected with my colleagues in a way I've never been able to. And it's been a total game changer for me. So thank you for that. And I will tell you, that's better than any award we've ever received. It has a real impact on people. And as designers, we have to acknowledge that if we believe the spaces we're designing have a positive impact on people, and we wouldn't be in this profession if we didn't, we also have to acknowledge that if we don't really understand the impact of what we're doing, it could have a negative impact. And in our game, like in our world, that's just not okay.
No. It's, what a beautiful story. So thank you for sharing it. Is it such a thing that someone can jump between hypo and hyper?
Oh yeah, you can be.
I definitely think I'm that person.
You can be hypersensitive to one thing and hyposensitive to something else. All of those elements are totally independent of each other. And you can, other things can exacerbate the situation. So if I'm feeling anxious and I'm under a lot of pressure, then it can make some of those things even worse, right? So if I come in the morning and I'm really anxious and I know I have this big deadline and, it can make everything like just heightened. But in the afternoon, I've done it. I've submitted it. It went great. I'm really excited. Now I get to just take a moment and breathe. And you might need a very different type of space later on. And so think about, just as humans, our moods. Sometimes you're in a great mood, sometimes you're not, right? Sometimes things are agitated, sometimes things are not. Your environment, there's all kinds of things that are impacting us as humans. And we need to acknowledge that not only do we have a whole variety within ourselves, but just across the spectrum of people. And so this whole notion that I can design one space that's going to be right for everybody all the time is just so ridiculous that we need to break free from that.
Yeah. You were going to tell me 3 spaces that you thought were the most eye-opening. You gave me focus pods. I'm definitely not letting the other 2 go.
Yeah. So focus pods.
Yeah.
The lighting, so the
Okay.
migraines, right? So having the adjustable lighting, and
Yeah.
then even just like giving people options and choices. Okay, so if you have assigned seats and you assign somebody to sit in a spot, I don't know any company that says, Guy, do you have any sensitivities? Are you sensitive to visual distractions, people walking by constantly? Or do you feel psychologically unsafe if your back is exposed to an opening and you can't see who's coming up behind you? Or are you troubled by acoustic stimulation? Nobody asked that. And so you come in, there's a desk right across from the conference center that I'm going to sit you at because that's the available spot. Your ability to function and be high functioning has just plummeted based on where I randomly selected you, because it's a total mismatch for your sensory needs. Whereas if you had options and choices, then you would intuitively, kind of instinctively navigate to the spot that was most comfortable for you. And I say intuitively and instinctively because I think we have suppressed our sensory intelligence so much that most of us don't even know what our own triggers are, because we've never really had the option to choose or to think about it. And so we really aren't that aware, and we're all just masking. And I'll give you the perfect example of this. Guy, if I said, we're going to go to lunch, do you have any preferences about where the table is? Most people would be like, yeah, no, I don't care. But the second you start walking into that restaurant, every single one of us is like, oh, no, I don't want to sit over there. I want to sit over here. And you don't even know why. And so we have got to tap back into who we really are, or what
Mhm.
kind of environments are going to support us best, so that we
Mhm.
can make better choices and decisions.
That's amazing. That restaurant analogy, it floods into my head. I'm like, oh, I'm so that person. I've got to sit in that seat.
Everybody is. We're all that same way, right? Or that chair. Like, no, I'm not sitting there. That's my seat, right? And again, most of us can't even articulate why. You just instinctively know that's where you want to be.
When people are, obviously everyone's now creating flexible spaces, and choices are now a much bigger thing, which is great in lots of ways, like you said. And I think that is huge for everybody, everybody. And is there anything that you're seeing that companies are sort of typical mistakes that people are making, pitfalls when creating those flexible spaces?
I'll give you 2. Variety, anxiety. Okay, so if you give people too many choices and it's too chaotic and confusing, and it's not legible, or you can't really comprehend it, then that's another stressor. Okay, so we have to be very structured about this. It's not just randomly throwing a bunch of things in there. The other thing is that I think in most open environments, we have this is where all of our research on workplace comes together with all the research on neurodiversity. And our research on workplace will tell us that there are 6 things that people are doing when they come into an office, right? They're either concentrating, contemplating. That's different, right? One is deep thought. The other one is almost freeing your mind, right? So it's kind of the opposite. One is kind of process or communal work, things you're doing in a group setting. There's creating, congregating, and socializing. Okay. So having the right mix of that kit of parts and those modalities is important. And we want to have a hyper and a hypo version of each one of those as best as we can, or even kind of zones within zones, right? But even if you have the right kit of parts, the way that we're laying things out in offices, it's like taking your dinner right before you're eating it, throwing it into a blender, pureeing it, and then pour it into a cup. We are pureeing the workplace because we are just throwing everything in there together, intermixing it, and not clearly defining the zones for the intention, right? So we have a bunch of workstations that are all together, and then we plop in the middle of it a gathering space, and then right next to it, we put a quiet spot for somebody to sit. Because of the proximity of that, none of those really function in the way that you hoped that they would, and therefore they just negate each other. It's like taking your dining room table and putting it in your bedroom and wondering why you can't sleep when your kids are having dinner, okay? So spatial sequencing is really important. And 90% of the open environments that I would go into that are very challenging for people that can't handle that much stimulation don't have clearly defined zones. And I'm not saying you have to have a wall that says, here's the zone, right? But just, with intention, we are designing spaces so that in a quiet space, it really is quiet. And you might have a little bit softer lighting and a little bit of different colors. And, maybe it's higher sound masking in some of those spaces. And in another space, it's meant for loud, gregarious laughter and brighter colors and bigger spaces, and maybe there's a little bit of music, etc. We just are putting one masking system across everything, one lighting system, and just pureeing everything in there. So we need to be much more intentional about the types of zones or environments. And this is where I think we are evolving from activity-based working. You choose where to sit based on the activity you're doing, to environmental-based working. You choose where to sit based on the space that meets your environmental needs. It's quieter. It's louder. It's warmer. It's colder. It's a little darker. It's a little brighter. And then you feel more safe and secure in that space, and it's functioning in a way that you need it to function.
Yeah, and the thing that's triggering off straight in my mind is how do you tie that in with brand cohesion and consistency? And I know we're designing for people and it's not all about the brand, but at the same time, I can hear end clients saying that potentially.
Yeah. Well, Guy, we believe that the space should be the physical embodiment of the organization, its culture, and its work styles. So you have to really understand what are people doing and how do they connect and how do they really work. Having the space represent who you are, I think, is really, really important just to tap into a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of mission that is so important for all of us to have. And so creating kind of that space, that's kind of like the shell, and we think about guidelines, a common thread that goes through the space that ties it all together. Right? But then you can have a little bit of options and choices in that. And in every built environment, there are naturally occurring warm areas and cooler areas, darker spaces and brighter spaces, busier areas and quieter areas. And the workplace is one of the last places that we aren't being nudged by technology to meet our needs. So you can't even go online and shop without things being directed to you based on your past preferences or choices. But when you go into the workplace, it's like, hey, we've never seen you before, right? Who are you? We have all these sensors in the environment. And so if we can tap into our sensory intelligence and say, you know what, I really prefer a little spaces that are a little bit cooler, a little bit quieter. I love to have the sun, whatever. And I want to be away from certain people, or I need to be next to certain people. And if we know that, and then those sensors are telling us where are those spots in the building, and can feed that into an app so that when you arrive to the office, it says, welcome, Guy. We know that you like spaces that are really cool and a little bit darker, and you want to stay away from that loud talker. We recommend that you go sit in this part of the building today. But as the sun moves, or as people come in, or as things change, because they do, buildings are kind of this living ecosystem, it might nudge you to say, hey, you might want to think about moving over to this side of the building now or to this spot, because we know that you have like a big meeting coming up. You're going to be on a call. You're going to be talking a lot. It's getting a little warmer where you are, etc. You might want to choose to sit over here. And so it's helping us navigate where we might want to be, just like everything else in our life. Disneyland does this. You tell it before, what are the big things that you want to do when you're there? And then it charts what's happening within the park and can nudge you to go to spaces that they know you want to be in when it's lower peak versus high peak, etc. And so that's kind of, in a sense, how they control that flow and help you have a better experience. But we're not leveraging that technology, nor our sensory intelligence of ourselves to really help us navigate these spaces.
That's phenomenal technology. And you say that's out there?
It's there. I mean, first of all you need to do is understand what your preferences are. So have a little bit of understanding about your sensory intelligence, and there's lots of ways you can figure that out. And then the sensors are already collecting all that information. So it's just about feeding that information to you. And we're working with a few software developers right now that are really kind of taking this to the next level. But rudimentary elements of that already exist and are kind of out there and can help nudge us to spaces.
Yeah, I mean, sure, the technology is there. I just haven't heard someone using it in such a proactive manner, Kay, to be honest, which is great to hear. Like, user experience, that's phenomenal. Is there any brands you can share, or is that something that you can't?
There's a whole bunch that are emerging, and I wouldn't do anybody justice if I started to pick one or two out. But I would say Unwired Philip Ross is really clued into what a lot of those sensory elements are telling us and kind of tracking it. These things, Guy, are evolving so quickly, it's kind of overwhelming. It truly is. When you think about the number of apps and sensory things that are out there today, it's kind of overwhelming, I think.
No, yeah. No, it's amazing to hear.
We have cars, and have had them for years, where you can start the car before you even leave your house, right? It's by the time you get down there, it automatically unlocks because of a fob that you have in your pocket, and everything in that space is preset to your condition. So you get in there, the music, the lighting, the seat position, the steering column, the temperature, everything automatically adjusts to you. You sit in your car for about a half an hour, get to your workplace, you walk in, and we're all crawling around on the floor trying to find an outlet. Like, we have not leveraged technology to the fullest extent to enable better human experiences. And that means we have to tap into what is it that we actually need and what are our preferences. And then designers need to create spaces that can provide that tied in with that technology. But it's all there. We just haven't connected the dots.
Yeah, one of my questions I even find personally, but I know is a big topic, is always signage. And I think what you're talking about is just like sort of dynamic signage and in the rawest form. Like, it's probably not very complimentary to call it that, but it's really just helping people navigate the place to the best optimal.
Let's call it wayfinding, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not just like, as designers, when you walk into a space and you don't know where you are, if there's a hallway to the right that is dimly lit and a little bit narrower, and there's a hallway to the left that's bright and wider, 90% of people will walk to the left because it's almost telling you where to go, right? And so there's all kinds of ways as a designer that I can control your behavior in a space. Chairs in McDonald's were designed to be comfortable for 15 minutes and then you get out because it's about turn, right? Where Starbucks originally had these big, comfy sofas that you could barely get out of, because who wants to go to a coffee shop where nobody is, right? And so the way we design everything in that space is kind of controlling your behavior. And if we really can tap into that and understand that. But the challenge with signage, this is why I'm going to change it to wayfinding. The challenge with signage is we kind of, as designers, will jokingly say, if you have to put up a sign, we didn't design it appropriately in the first place. Okay. And not everybody can read. Not everybody can see. And sometimes too many signs can be overwhelming. So when we are designing, and we're taking these principles and we are including them in every kind of space imaginable. So when our team was redesigning LaGuardia Airport, one of the things is that anxiety you have when you're in an airport because you don't know where am I going? How far is it? Are they boarding? Are they not? What's happening? Right. And so they intentionally tried to say, can we design an airport with as few signs as possible to make it obvious and clear to people? And of course you have signage, but not just throwing signs everywhere and overwhelming people. Because if there's too many signs, then you can't process them all and you miss them. Right. And so you literally can come in on this level and you can look over the airport and you can see, oh, there's my gate. They're not boarding yet. And I know how far I have to go and I know I don't have to run. Okay. Or, oh, there's a quiet space that I can just go and sit off to the side for a minute and just take a breath. And the areas are designed very distinctly. So the areas that are meant for people that are just kind of waiting have lots of biofeedback. They feel like more like a park than a thoroughfare, right? And so we need to start embedding these principles that help people intuitively navigate spaces without having to throw up a bunch of signs. Because little kids can't read. People from a different country may not be able to understand our language. People that are blind, people that are just overwhelmed, people that are chatting at you, right? So we have to incorporate this into the way that we design spaces.
Yeah, no, I feel like what you're saying about the technology thing is, I know it's been there for a while, and I get the whole car analogy, like big time, and we just haven't incorporated it. But I do feel that it's like something that we aren't seeing mainstream at the minute that we should be seeing mainstream in the next 5 years.
I think you know.
Is there any other emerging trends or changes to the workspace? I don't really like trends because it makes it sound like it's coming and going. So, but any kind of emerging changes that we can make to our workspace, because the world is moving so fast, and is our workspace keeping up, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I think we're seeing taking the elements that are already there and using them a little bit more intelligently. So really leaning a little bit more into color theory and really leaning more into, I guess another thing that's really important is visual clutter. And so this is really a big topic right now in education because they now are identifying children at an early age, and such a high percentage of kids. I think it's there's a study in the UK and in the US where more than 50% of people in their 20s identified as being neurodivergent. And so when you think about a traditional elementary school or lower grade schools, they tend to just be these visual clusters of just so much overstimulation. And then we wonder why kids can't focus and pay attention. So as an adult, I go in and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm overwhelmed with all the things. And so it's about being very intentional about what we're doing, making sure that there's visual order, not visual clutter and chaos. Even in open environments, people tend to be overwhelmed a lot by visual clutter and things that are out of sync and out of order. So having a logic to things, making things legible and making it so that they can actually navigate through spaces is really important. And, we lean into the color theory, we lean into lighting, acoustics, all of this. And I think the biggest challenges that we're seeing right now are acoustics and lighting and temperature. And then just, how do I manage all of this? And I think a lot of people right now are asking for quiet without really understanding that quiet in spaces that are not meant to be quiet is creepy and is triggering because it's not natural, right? If you seek out a quiet spot because you need to focus, okay, then you self-selected that. But if you're in a big space that is too quiet, it doesn't feel right. And I say, if you go to a restaurant and there's one other couple in that restaurant, that's going to be a horrible meal because you're going to hear everything those people are saying. If you go to a restaurant and you're shouting because it's so loud, that's a horrible experience. We don't really want no sound, right? Not all sound is noise. We want to have kind of that background hum that just helps people feel more comfortable. And that way you're not clearly hearing what somebody else is saying. And so in many spaces today, it's not that the spaces are too loud. We've taken out all the background hum. We've taken out, we put, silencers on everything in the spaces today. And it actually has made it so that they're kind of almost like these echo chambers where you can clearly hear things that are going on all over. And again, that's far more disturbing. So we need to make sure that we're getting the right level of sound for the activity at hand, and that we vary that throughout the space. So if you really do need quiet, you can find it. But a lot of people need that buzzy space, and they're going to seek that out. I was with some people the other day, and they literally said, one guy said, yeah, like if I really need to focus and concentrate on something, I go into the public zone where there's all this buzzy stuff, and I just feed off of that energy, and I get lost in that hum, and I can just like, ding, like just go for it. And the other person was like, no, 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 no. I need total silence, and I can't have anybody walking by or any visual distractions. So just two people, total opposite needs, both very valid. And we have to create spaces that can provide that.
Yeah, that's, and it could even be this. It could be the opposite way around for those same people on a different day. We can get so tick boxy and try just to meet the rules and get approved and get a rubber stamp, but it's not about that. It's about the flexibility and how humans evolve and their work evolves, and they evolve as humans. They change and their life changes.
Yeah, and Guy, I want to go back to something you said before, because I think you touched on something that's really important. We design a lot of guidelines and standards for our clients. And I think in some cases, people are taking them too far. They've come up with this kit of parts and, every single thing and et cetera. And the intent is to have consistency across their portfolio and to have a similar experience for people and to make it easier for them to roll out spaces. But sometimes it's so overly genericized that it doesn't meet for people on the fringes or on the edges. And it kind of has beaten out some of the creativity, or we can't bring in some new things because that's not in the guidelines and standards yet, right? And so I question, are we doing these to make it easier for you to roll out space? Or are we doing it so that it's better for the people that actually have to occupy it long term? And the focus should be on the people that are going to be there long term. And so I think we have tried so hard for so long to design the, spaces that would accommodate the average person doing the average thing. I don't know who that is anymore. I really don't. And I think we need to break ourselves free and to allow ourselves to color outside the box every now and then, and to get a little messy, because we as people, we're messy and we're complex. And so I totally understand that whole need for, you want that consistency of experience and you want to be able to roll things out. But man, we have to be able to have a little flexibility and fungibility, and it needs to be able to accommodate those people on the fringes. Otherwise, what we are doing in our industry is the equivalent of saying, all right, everybody gets a size 10 gray unitard, whether you're man, woman, child, 80-year-old, big, small, whatever, everybody gets the same thing. Good luck, right? We can't do that anymore. And we really have to understand, if we want people to thrive and we want people to be successful, we need to meet their basic needs.
Yeah, that's good. And you've obviously been doing this a long time, Kay, and you've learned a lot.
40 years.
And you've learned a lot over that time.
Yes.
And did you say 8 years ago you were picking up this neurodiversity thing?
Yeah. We were in a meeting, is it 8 years ago now? But it might have been 9 now. Time keeps changing, right? So probably 9 years ago.
Funny thing how time moves.
I know, it is, right? Probably 9 years ago now, we were in a meeting with a client. And as we were leaving, he just casually said, how do you design space for someone that's ADHD? And we had an okay answer. I have 5 kids, and I've been a designer for that time 31 years. So had designed all kinds of crazy spaces on the planet. Had a pretty good answer, not a great answer. And we wanted to know more. So we started to dive into this, and what we found is there was all kinds of information about what neurodiversity was and why we should invite neurodivergent people into our organizations because of all the benefits that we're going to get from that, but not a lot about the space. And it's, so what we're doing is we're taking a freshwater fish and we're putting them in salt water. And so if you're not addressing the built environment, you're setting those people up for failure. So we started to do a really deep dive into all things neurodiverse and neurodivergent, and really to have a better understanding. And I think that now we've done 6 research initiatives, written multiple reports, done workshops, literature reviews, written, I can't even tell you how many articles or pieces. We have the book that we came out with about 2 months ago. And we've done pilots, and we have multiple case studies in the book of where we have incorporated this into projects, and the benefits that our clients are getting from it.
Yeah, that's guess that's what I was going to ask is back over all that time, what's the one thing that you've changed your mind about on neurodiversity? Something that you've had an aha moment yourself, I guess.
Well, that's a really good question. I would say for me, the aha moment was when we brought our workplace research, because we've been doing that for years and years and years, and simultaneously, when we collided the two of them together. And I think in the initial report that we did, which was pretty extensive, we didn't talk as much about hyper and hypo, and but really understanding that you have sensory seekers and sensory avoiders, and we need to accommodate both, because in many, many cases, if I picked up 75% of what somebody has written about this, a lot of them don't even mention that. And many cases, they just assume that everybody is hypersensitive, meaning we're all being overwhelmed by the environment. But we're forgetting the fact that there are people that actually need more, and they need it in a certain way. And so it's easy to design a space that's all one thing. The challenge really comes when you have to design for both. And we can do that. We just need to understand that, and we need to understand that there's this whole sensory spectrum, and every single one of us is neurodiverse. We're just not all neurodivergent. And what might be annoying for someone that's kind of neurotypical can be debilitating for someone that's neurodivergent. And it really does impact every single one of us. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that what we're talking about is for a small group of the population. It's for every single one of us.
I like that you said neurotypical is not necessarily a good thing. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Average. Oh, you're so typical, Guy.
You're so
Right?
typical.
Was that ever a compliment? No, it's not. In fact, I hate the whole language. And that's the other thing, I think, in the 8 years or 9 years that we've been doing this, the language has changed. And there's a lot of sensitivity around the language. And there's, some people prefer person first identities. Other people prefer, identity first language. And so it's a little bit of a challenge, but I just think that we are all neurodistinct. We're all a little bit different. We all think differently. We all process things differently. We feel differently, etc. We're all neurodistinct. And we really, I think the more that we can make people realize this is not about them, it's about a we, then I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I would literally ask you about 50 more questions. I love your answers. I love how composed and how deeply researched and intelligent it all is, Kay. It is truly so enlightening. But time is not on my side. And as always, I get into these conversations and I'm just rolling, and then it's like, you have to kind of clock off. But before you go, I want you just to tell the guests a little bit about your book.
A year ago, we were speaking at South by Southwest, and we presented on this topic the last several years. And I mean, we're on this whole roadshow speaking because awareness is important. And so trying to get that awareness out there. And a publisher was in the audience, and she came up and she asked us to write the book. And in all honesty, I really thought I was going to get through my career without ever having to write a book. Truly, Despina and I think, are the two that are like, let's make a bond that we're never going to write a book. And I broke that bond. Sorry, Despina. But she asked us if we would do it. And unfortunately, a colleague of mine was there with me and was like, sure, we'll do it. And the reason we didn't want to write a book is because I learn something new every day. I really, truly do. And, but we realized that we had so much information, it was important to get it out there. And so we had to get really clever in the book. Like, we put links to a lot of the research. So if people want to go deeper, they can. But we kind of say high level in the book on some of that. And we have a whole list of considerations that we have created, but it's a work in progress. We're still learning. We're still digging into acoustics more, and we're still doing research initiatives that are helping us define this. And so we did the problem with the list is the second you put it out, all of a sudden, if you want to change it, you kind of can't. So we put a QR code in the book to the list so that if you were to call me tomorrow, Guy, and say, oh my God, Kay, I just read this amazing report about acoustics, and we really should be thinking like this way and doing this, I can say, oh, that's amazing. I can update our list in real time. And we wrote it also. We had a big conversation. There is a tremendous amount of research and intellectual property that we put in this book. And there are a lot of people that are like, why are you giving that away to all of our competitors? But my fellow frenemies, other companies, are not my true competitors. Our competitors today are design firms that are doing it well and are neurowashing and are doing things and making companies realize or think there's no there, right? And we've had multiple companies call us and say, hey, we had this other company, we know about neurodiverse, we had this other company try to help us, and just really nothing came out of it. And then we heard you speak and we're like, oh my God, right? Like there is something there that we need to dig into. And so I'd rather give it away and have everybody doing it well than doing a disservice. And our real competitors are not, again, design firms. It's people today thinking that they can use generative AI to create a space without designers, because not thinking that all we do is based on what we think is cool and what we think is trending. Hate that word too. It's not. There is a real science to what we do. Every decision that I make for a reason, because I want to get a behavior, or I want to support a work style, or I want to accommodate a need in that space. This is not random. And so helping people understand that and the value of this and really doing it well is really important today.
It's amazing. Oh, thank you so much, Kay. Thank you for coming on to Space by Stansons. And yeah, I'm very passionate about how the things we live with and the spaces we inhabit do change how we think and feel and behave. And everything you said, just music to my ears. And so,
well, Guy, I'll make you a promise, right? So next time I'm in London, we'll get together and I'll let you choose whether we go to a buzzy like coffee shop in the middle of downtown London, or whether we go to something secluded and off the beaten trail or whatever. You can choose where we're going to go have our coffee, and then we can talk for hours and hours and hours.
And then whenever I ask someone out for coffee, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to sort of like assess their personality based on the place that they choose. Well, thank you, Kay. You brought so much insights into wayfinding, into that whole like technology that was absolutely fantastic, neurodiverse, but just in two ways, a hyper and hypersensitivity. There was loads of lessons there in that last 40 minutes, absolute gold. So I'm going to thank you very warmly and say, if you enjoyed the conversation, please do review, like the show. It does help us bring on fabulous guests like Kay, and we're very grateful to all the support. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. And I should say the name of the book, because I never said that: Designing Neuro-inclusive Workplaces, which is a horrible name because it's about so much more. But thank you for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
I think that's an amazing ending note. Okay, thank you.